It's been 60 years since For a Few Dollars More redefined the Western genre, but while the film lives forever, many of its stars didn't get the same ending. Some died young, others faded into obscurity, and a few carried secrets to their graves. You won't believe how their real lives ended, and how heartbreak followed even the toughest gunslingers. Peter Lee Lawrence as Mortimer's brother in flashback. Peter Lee Lawrence, whose real name was Carl Hirsch, was born on February 21, 1943 in California, USA. When he was only 22 years old, he played the role of Colonel Mortimer's younger brother in short flashback scenes of For a Few Dollars More in 1965. With his handsome face, melancholic eyes, and cold demeanor, Lawrence quickly captured the audience's attention. But behind that rising career was a cursed fate that would lead to his sudden death when he was just in his early 30s. After his initial success, Lawrence continued to appear in a series of Italian westerns such as $2,000 for Ringo and Killer Caliber 32, becoming a symbol of American masculinity amid the booming European film industry. In 1969, while filming Dove si spara di più, he met and fell in love with Spanish actress Cristina Galbo. They married and had a son, a life that seemed perfect. But by 1972, destiny began to turn. While shooting Los Caballeros del Botón de Ancla, Lawrence suddenly suffered a severe headache and collapsed on set. After examination, doctors diagnosed him with a malignant brain tumor. During the last 2 years of his life, Lawrence lived between physical agony and spiritual despair. He underwent surgery in Madrid, then moved to Zurich for chemotherapy and radium radiotherapy, which quickly drained his strength. In March 1974, Lawrence was hospitalized in Rome due to complications, and in the early morning of April 20th, he passed away from multiple organ failure caused by metastatic cancer. He was only 31 years old. Peter Lee Lawrence died quietly, leaving behind his young wife and small child, along with an estate of about $500,000, most of which was spent on medical treatment. Luigi Pistilli as Groggy. Luigi Pistilli was born on July 19, 1929, in Grosseto, Italy. In 1965, he played Groggy, the ruthless and jealous outlaw in El Indio's gang, in For a Few Dollars More, when he was 36 years old. With his angular face, piercing gaze, and distinct gravelly voice, Pistilli evoked both fear and sympathy from audiences, because behind that brutal appearance was a man full of inner conflict. However, when the lights of the film set went out, Pistilli returned to loneliness and instability. He constantly struggled with depression and broken relationships. His passionate love affair with singer and actress Milva once made him feel alive. But when the relationship ended in early 1996, Pistilli fell into crisis. At the same time, the play Tosca, in which he played Scarpia, was harshly criticized by Milan's theater reviewers. 2 blows in quick succession shattered his spirit completely. In despair, Pistilli reacted in the worst way. He publicly criticized Milva in the press, calling her a traitor, and soon after wrote her a letter of apology, confessing that he was being consumed by darkness in his mind. He began drinking every night and smoking incessantly to ease his stage fright, but the depression only deepened. On the evening of April 21st, 1996, just before the final performance of Tosca, Pistilli shot himself in the head at his private apartment in Milan. He was 66 years old. The death of Luigi Pistilli shocked all of Italy. The artistic community opened large discussions about mental health in the theater industry, and Milva, his former lover, cried on television, "I'm not angry at him. I just wish he had called me one last time." Pistilli left behind 2 children and an estate worth about $1.2 million. A considerable sum, but one that could not save him from loneliness. Klaus Kinski as Juan Wild. Klaus Kinski, whose real name was Klaus Günther Naksinski, was born on October 18, 1926, in Sopot, Free City of Danzig. When he was 39 years old, he played Juan Wild in For a Few Dollars More in 1965, a wild, violent, and instinct-driven bandit who both terrified and fascinated audiences. Though a small role, it marked the beginning of a highly controversial career for one of the most insane actors in European cinema history. Kinski's marital life was a chain of failures. He first married singer Gislinde Kuhlbeck in 1952, but the relationship quickly collapsed after only 3 years due to his violent and controlling behavior. His second wife, actress Ruth Brigitte Tocchi, gave birth to their daughter Nastasia Kinski, who would later become an international star. But her childhood was marked by fear of her father's rage. Kinski's third marriage, to Vietnamese model Minh Hoi Loanic, also ended bitterly. She left him, taking their small child, unable to bear his manic outbursts and unstable temper. Each breakup pushed him further into addiction to drugs and alcohol as a way to escape reality. In the years that followed, Kinski began to deteriorate physically. In 1971, he suffered his first heart attack while filming in Spain. However, he ignored all medical advice, continuing to work, use cocaine, and drink heavily, as if defying the death that was drawing near. His worsening health led to frequent panic attacks, making him more aggressive than ever. On November 23, 1991, Kinski died suddenly at his home in Lagunitas, California, at the age of 65. He died of an acute heart attack, alone in his isolated house, after his third divorce. After his death, his eldest daughter, Pola, publicly accused him of having abused her for 14 years, forever tainting his legacy with guilt and scandal. His net worth was estimated at around $4 million, most of which had been eroded by lawsuits and substance abuse. Gian Maria Volonte as El Indio. Gian Maria Volonte was born on April 9, 1933, in Milan, Italy. He transformed into El Indio, the intelligent, ruthless, and deeply tormented leader of the gang in For a Few Dollars More. In 1965, when he was 32, this role not only made him an iconic villain, but also showcased a rare psychological depth in the spaghetti western genre. Yet behind that calm exterior was a sensitive soul, constantly tormented by emotional turmoil. Volonte had a relationship lasting nearly 10 years with actress Carla Gravina, who was also a politician for the Italian Communist Party. They had a daughter together, but their love eventually crumbled due to differences in ideals and lifestyles. Later, he entered into a relationship with Armenian director Balducci, his companion, lover, and artistic soulmate. However, this bond also began to fade as Volonte became increasingly consumed by politics, devoting all his time to anti-fascist movements. Prolonged stress and age gradually broke down his health. He suffered from high blood pressure and several mild heart attacks, but refused to rest. In 1994, when he took on a role in Ulysses's Gaze, he was already 61, physically weak but mentally strong. The film was shot amid the war-torn Balkans, where the crew had to halt filming several times as real shells fell near the set. Under such brutal conditions, Volonte continued to act, ignoring his doctor's warnings. His body was returned to Italy and buried in a small cemetery on the island of La Maddalena, Sardinia, in accordance with his personal wishes. Friends said, "He was never afraid of death, only of being forgotten." Volonte's net worth was estimated at around $3.5 million, most of which he left to anti-fascist organizations and funds supporting young artists. Lee Van Cleef as Colonel Douglas Mortimer. Lee Van Cleef was born on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey. In 1965, he played Colonel Douglas Mortimer, a cold, intelligent bounty hunter haunted by the loss of his sister and driven by revenge when he was 40 years old. The role revived Van Cleef's career after years of being forgotten by Hollywood, turning him into the ultimate symbol of the charming villain in the spaghetti western genre. Van Cleef's private life was filled with turbulence. He was married 3 times. His first marriage, to Patsy Ruth Cale, lasted 15 years and produced 3 children, but it ended as he spiraled into emotional crisis after World War II. His second wife, Joan Marjorie Drain, left him after a 1958 car accident that damaged the nerves in his face, leaving him with the signature crooked smile. He fell into deep depression, often saying, "People only see the scar. They don't see the man anymore." His final marriage, to Barbara Havaloni, brought him more peace, but illness and age left them living under constant worry. By the late 1970s, Van Cleef faced serious heart problems caused by 40 years of smoking. In 1981, he had a pacemaker implanted. The condition left him short of breath and suffering from frequent chest pain, yet he kept working out of fear of being forgotten. Barbara recalled that many nights he stayed awake, staring at old photographs. Throat cancer developed quietly, and recurring heart attacks gradually weakened him beyond recovery. On the night of December 16, 1989, Van Cleef suffered a massive heart attack and passed away at his home in Oxnard, California, at the age of 64. He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, where his tombstone reads, "Best of the Bad." His net worth was estimated at $2 million. His wife tearfully said, "He was never a bad man, just a man who didn't know how to stop fighting." Rosemary Dexter as Mortimer's sister. Rosemary Dexter was born on July 19, 1944, in Quetta, British India. When she was 21 years old, she played Colonel Mortimer's sister in the tragic flashback scenes of For a Few Dollars More in 1965. Though brief, the role left a lasting impression. The fragile, beautiful young woman became a symbol of loss within the film. From then on, Rosemary quickly became one of the most sought-after actresses in Italian cinema of the 1960s. Success came early, but her love life was a series of heartbreaks. Rosemary dated several famous directors, but most of them only saw her as a means to advance their careers. Some promised her major roles and abandoned her once they had used her name. These bitter experiences shattered her trust, driving her into depression and isolation. In a 1973 interview, she admitted, "I live under the spotlight, but my heart is full of darkness." Not long after, she developed a chronic illness, possibly cancer or a neurological disorder, that rapidly weakened her health. In 1976, at just 32, she announced her retirement from cinema. In her later years, she lived alone in the small town of Recanati, unmarried, childless, and with little contact with friends. The prolonged illness left her nearly housebound, passing her days reading and listening to music. Neighbors described her as thin, frail, and quiet, like a ghost of her former self. In September 2010, police discovered her lifeless body in her home after she had not been seen for several days. Rosemary Dexter was 66 years old. She was cremated in Recanati in a small, private ceremony with no relatives present. La Repubblica called her the forgotten queen of Italian cinema. Her net worth was around $800,000, most of which she left to charities supporting women with depression. Rosemary's story ended just like her role in the film, a quiet soul, beautifully sad and eternally alone. Joseph Egger as Old Prophet. Joseph Egger was born on February 22, 1889, in Donauwitz, Austria-Hungary. At the age of 76, he played the Old Prophet in For a Few Dollars More, a mysterious, slow, and wise figure who added a surreal touch to the film in 1965. Though he appeared in only a few scenes, Egger left a lasting impression with his distant gaze and raspy voice. It was a late but significant role in his career, the highlight of more than 70 films and a lifetime devoted to European theater and cinema. In his personal life, Egger was a calm man who lived simply with his wife, Erna, and their 3 children. The couple endured years of hardship after the war, but faced poverty hand in hand. Erna was his emotional anchor, the one who kept him steady as old age crept in. However, in mid-1966, she suddenly suffered a stroke and passed away after several days in a coma. The shock devastated Egger. Friends recalled that he barely ate, spending hours looking at old photos of his wife, whispering through tears, "I'm the one who's old, but she left first." Less than 3 days later, Egger suffered a stroke in his home in Gablitz, Lower Austria. He was taken to the hospital but did not survive, passing away on August 29, 1966, at the age of 77. Egger left behind an estate of about $300,000, mostly from small acting roles and lifelong savings. He was buried beside his wife in Gablitz Cemetery, where his tombstone bears a simple inscription, "He made time stop for a moment." Lorenzo Robledo as Minutillo. Lorenzo Robledo was born on May 5, 1918, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In 1965, when he was just 47 years old, he played Minutillo, a minor member of El Indio's gang in For a Few Dollars More. Robledo made an impression with his rugged face and desperate eyes, perfectly embodying the survivors in Sergio Leone's brutal cinematic world. That role was his only escape from poverty. After emigrating from Argentina to Italy, Robledo struggled to survive. He lived in a small rented room near the Cinecittà studios, slept on a cement floor, and accepted any job available: horse riding, high falls, even taking real punches during fight scenes. Once in Almeria, Spain, he was dragged more than 30 meters by a horse, breaking several ribs and nearly losing his life. Yet Robledo kept working, saying, "I'm not afraid of pain. I'm afraid of stopping." But the cost was devastating. His body deteriorated, and a permanent spinal injury forced him to use a cane from the age of 60. By the 1980s, Robledo's health had clearly declined. He suffered from severe arthritis and mild heart disease, but continued to take occasional small television roles to make ends meet. His solitary life, without wife or children, made his loneliness even deeper. The enormous shadow of Sergio Leone's legacy left Robledo forever as the man on the sidelines of cinema history, though he was undeniably part of it. In September 2006, Lorenzo Robledo died in Madrid at the age of 88 from heart failure. He was cremated in a small ceremony organized by the Spanish Actors Guild, attended by only a few old colleagues. His net worth was estimated at around $600,000, mostly savings from more than 80 films throughout his life. Frank Braña as Blackie. Frank Braña, whose real name was Francisco Braña Perez, was born on February 24, 1934, in Asturias, Spain. He played Blackie, a cold, brutal henchman in For a Few Dollars More in 1965 when he was 31. His rugged features and piercing stare made Braña a familiar face in the spaghetti western genre. Before fame, he worked as a miner and later as a driver in Madrid, carrying the toughness and endurance of the working class into every role he played. Braña's personal life was marked by tragedy. He married young, but his first wife left him after years of separation due to his constant filming in the deserts of Almeria. In her final letter, she wrote, "You love cinema more than your family." The heartbreak closed his heart for many years. In 1970, he met Maria, a young nurse who would become his lifelong companion and caregiver. Yet, Maria would later witness her husband's slow decline due to his addiction to cigarettes. He smoked more than 2 packs a day, sometimes even during filming. It was this habit that would ultimately lead to his death. In his later years, Braña suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. He had difficulty breathing, coughed violently, and relied on an oxygen tank to move around. Still, he went to film sets, taking small supporting roles just to feel alive. But his body grew weaker, and his breath shorter with each passing day. On February 13, 2012, Frank Braña passed away in Madrid from respiratory failure at the age of 77. He died in the arms of his second wife after nearly half a century together. His net worth was estimated at $1 million, accumulated from over 200 films he had appeared in throughout his career. Aldo Sambrell as Cuchillo. Aldo Sambrell, whose real name was Alfredo Sanchez Brell, was born on February 23, 1931 in Vallecas, Madrid. At the age of 34, he played Cuchillo, the knife-wielding assassin in For a Few Dollars More in 1965. With his ruthless eyes and quick stride, he became one of Sergio Leone's most memorable villains. Behind the spotlight were wounds that never healed. Sambrell had once been a soccer player, but an injury forced him to retire and shift to stunt work in films. He married Candida Lopez Cano in 1964, a gentle, loyal woman who followed him to every film set. Yet the life of cinema was merciless. Over 40 years, he endured dozens of accidents, falling off horses, breaking ribs, and suffering facial burns from explosions. Candida once said, he wasn't afraid of pain, only of being forgotten. In his later years, Sambrell's health collapsed. He suffered from high blood pressure, pneumonia, and 3 consecutive strokes that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak. His devoted wife cared for him every day, playing the good, the bad, and the ugly soundtrack beside his bed. She said that sometimes he would still smile faintly. He understood everything. He just couldn't speak anymore, she recalled. The final stroke in July 2010 ended his suffering. Sambrell passed away in Alicante at the age of 79, and his ashes were scattered at Fort Bravo. Aldo Sambrell's net worth was estimated at around $900,000, much of it earned from Leone's films and international productions. Mario Brega as Nino. Mario Brega was born on March 25, 1923, in Rome, Italy. He played Nino, the large, brutish thug in El Indio's gang in For a Few Dollars More. In 1965, when he was 42 years old, with his massive build, fierce face, and raspy voice, he became the gentle giant familiar to audiences of Sergio Leone's films, appearing successively in A Fistful of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Before fame, Brega worked as a butcher in Rome. His life was simple until cinema arrived like a miracle, but that light also brought its own darkness. In 1949, he married Lucia, a kind woman whose patience was tested by his growing obsession with film. Their marriage quickly fell apart because of his long absences on location and his heavy drinking after shoots. Lucia left him in 1961, leaving behind a short note, "You belong to the set, not to me." The heartbreak left him deeply lonely. He once admitted, "I am strong on screen, but fragile in life." In his later years, Brega suffered from heart disease and high blood pressure. Addicted to cigarettes, he smoked 2 packs a day despite repeated warnings from doctors. He refused treatment, saying, "I was born to make films, not to live forever." In 1994, after a severe chest pain, he collapsed at home before reaching the hospital. Mario Brega passed away on July 23, 1994, in Rome at the age of 71. The cause was confirmed as a heart attack. He was buried simply in a Roman cemetery, his gravestone engraved with the words, Il Gigante Buono, the gentle giant. His net worth was about $1.1 million, mostly from his work in Leone's films. Throughout his life, he knew only one truth: to live authentically through his roles, even if the price was his own heart. Benito Stefanelli as Luke Chioggi. Benito Stefanelli was born on September 2, 1928, in Rome, Italy. At the age of 37, he played Luke Chioggi, a loyal henchman in For a Few Dollars More in 1965. Beyond acting, he was also the fight choreographer and weapons expert for Sergio Leone's films, helping shape the iconic action style that defined the spaghetti western era. Behind his success were deep scars. Stefanelli married young and had one son, Marco, but the danger of his career and long periods away from home caused his marriage to fall apart. Over the years, he was thrown from horses, suffered a broken arm, had a prop gun explode and burn his face, and endured a serious head injury from a real explosion on set. Each time he returned home, he carried new scars, both on his body and in his heart. His wife left in 1972, taking their young son. Stefanelli lived alone, drowning in alcohol and haunted by the thought that, "I gave everything to cinema." By his 60s, his health began to decline. Decades of smoking and the relentless stress of film work had weakened his heart. He suffered a heart attack in 1995 but refused surgery, saying, "If my heart stops beating on set, I'll die smiling." The disease kept returning, leaving him frail and unable to work. Every morning he would sit alone in his old cafe staring at a photo of himself with Clint Eastwood, a quiet reminder that all his pain had meaning. On December 18, 1999, Benito Stefanelli died of a heart attack in Rome at the age of 71. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered around the hills of La Storta, where he had once practiced shooting for Leone's films. His net worth was estimated at around $850,000, mostly from supporting roles and technical consulting work. He spent his life playing villains, yet inside, he remained a loyal man, to his craft and to the wounds that built his legacy. Clint Eastwood as Manco. Clint Eastwood was born on May 31, 1930, in San Francisco, California, USA. In 1965, he was 35 years old when he played Manco, the cool, sharp-witted bounty hunter in For a Few Dollars More. With his knife-like gaze and effortless composure, his character became an immortal symbol of the spaghetti western genre. This role not only propelled Eastwood to international stardom, but also launched the legendary Dollars trilogy. Yet behind his glittering career was a personal life filled with turbulence. Eastwood was married twice, but he was also involved in numerous controversial affairs, fathering at least 8 children with 6 different women. His first marriage, to Margaret Neville Johnson, lasted more than 30 years, but much of it was marked by emotional distance due to his infidelities. When it ended, she left him with a single line, "I loved a man who could never love anyone but himself." His next long-term relationship, with actress Sondra Locke, lasted 14 years and seemed like a true partnership, but it ended in bitterness. Locke accused him of control, betrayal, and of sabotaging her career. Old age brought Eastwood more loss. Throughout his life, he almost never stopped working. But in 2024, tragedy struck. His daughter, Allison Eastwood, passed away from cancer. It was one of the few times he was seen crying publicly. A mild heart condition, brought on by age and decades of stress, now requires regular medical supervision, yet he refuses to retire, saying, "If I stop working, I'll die." Today, at 95 years old, Clint Eastwood lives in Carmel by the Sea, California, where he once served as mayor. Though his health is fragile, he continues to direct and oversee film projects, most recently Juror No. 2, 2024. With an estimated net worth of $375 million, he remains not only a cinematic icon, but also a living testament to endurance, discipline, and the will to rise above pain. And now you know, behind the glory of For a Few Dollars More were lives marked by pain, loss, and unforgettable passion. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold Hollywood tragedies and legends that time tried to forget.